The world of delisted video games is growing at an accelerated rate, and that sucks. What was once a place you'd find MMORPGs past their expiry date has become this graveyard of games as a service, online-only titles, licensed games, and the newest of the bunch, Babylon's Fall. May thee rest in peace. The idea of a video game being taken away is a fairly new concept. For ages, this would only happen to online-only things like MMOs or shooters, but this also generally meant that it would become unplayable, something like MAG or Star Wars Galaxies. But delisting is a totally different concept. It's happened with licensed games here and there, and companies pulling something off of store shelves due to questionable content like San Andreas with its hot coffee. One could argue that Sega channel exclusives like Wily Wars disappearing after the service shuttered were delisting. There's odd titles here and there like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and Deadpool. However, I'd personally say that the loudest and most mainstream examples of this happening are two games that have a lot in common: Flappy Bird and PT. Don't uninstall Flappy Bird off your phone, millions cried out. Don't delete PT, people loudly proclaimed from the mountaintops. Generally, when a game becomes delisted, you're able to re-download it from the servers of where you purchased it, but in the case of these two, they became hot commodities that you could huck on eBay for a stupid amount of money. If there was ever an argument against video gaming going fully digital, it is 100% this. Thank the gods above for emulation.
So yo, it's Austin, and I got this old Android with like the battery kind of bursting out of the back, but it has Flappy Bird on it, so $4,000? Yeah, this channel's been around for nearly 10 years now, which first of all, wow, but also the entire landscape has changed so dramatically since that time. In 2023, a game getting delisted is just kind of an expected part of the process for a lot of these things, which is incredibly sad and really depressing. In fact, while I was working on this, literally just the other day, EA's like, yeah, we're taking down all the Battlefields and Mirror's Edge, and thankfully they walked back Mirror's Edge, but yeah, that's not good. Thankfully, there are a lot of people working overtime to make sure that a lot of these delisted games are still playable in 2023, which means that yes, you can play PlayStation Home still. I don't know why you would, but you can. So this here is gonna be a showcase of a bunch of delisted games that can only be acquired nowadays by means. But hey, if you're not gonna let me give you money for it, I'm gonna find a way. Looking at you, Nintendo. Speaking of spending a proper amount of money, before we get really digging into the unknown, we need to talk about today's sponsor, PayPal Honey. Online shopping can be a bit of a pain in the butt. There's always a ton of listings, a ton of websites, and a ton of products to choose for, and you want to make sure you're getting the best deal. Well, Honey is the #1 shopping tool in America for those of us looking to save some bucks. Honey is this small browser extension that just kind of sits in the corner up top and automatically searches for coupons for some of your favorite shopping websites, and it's something that I actually use a ton. If you're already shopping online, it is pretty much a no-brainer to be using this. I've personally saved a bunch on video games, board games, and food delivery apps using coupons that otherwise I would have no idea existed. You'll be checking out and then suddenly Honey will pop up with massive coupons, which on average save around 18%. It's personally hooked me up with a couple buy one get one frees on those smaller gaming outlet websites, and you know that saved me a ton. You think with something like this you'd be paying some kind of service fee, but no, Honey is completely free and is something that I've been using for years. So use that freeness and hop on over to joinhoney.com/Austin Eruption to add it to your browser, get Honey, and start your savings today. That's joinhoney.com/Austin Eruption. Thanks to Honey for today's sponsor, but for now, we need to embrace the erased past by talking about delisted video games. And I'm gonna get started by taking it a bit personally. Do you ever have a bunch of love for a video game publisher or their library of IPs, and they just keep doing really stupid things? Well, incoming another 30-something to talk about Sega. It's no secret around these parts that I'm a bit of a Sega fanboy. This ain't even a Sonic thing. Their exclusives and worlds have always appealed to me as a kid. Toss me a Gunstar Heroes, Rocket Knight Adventures, or a Streets of Rage any day of the week. And still. But when it comes to taking video games offline, Sega is one of the worst out there, only really eclipsed by like Activision and Electronic Arts. By the way, I used delistedgames.com a good bit for research on this video, so shout out to them for having this all in a nice spot to read. So,
Sega. Oh, Sega. This is a company known in the past for its arcade classics and repeatedly porting them over and over on each generation of consoles, and maybe even depreciating their own retro market values. But for some reason, in the 7th generation, they had a difficult time keeping their stuff, well, listed. Last time we brought up Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast, and the fact that it's not purchasable anywhere anymore is a crime against humanity. Thankfully, physical copies of this exist, but not so much for Afterburner Climax. Afterburner is freaking awesome. It's one of the coolest arcade titles out there. It's like Outrun plus Top Gun plus a whole bag of crack. It doesn't matter the entry, you're probably gonna have a great time. If you've ever had the opportunity to play the original in one of those moving cabinets, it's a thrill. Climax was a digital-only title that hit consoles in 2010 that had the pleasure of being delisted not once, but twice. The game is super simple. You fly a jet, you go super fast, and blast everything out of the sky while bumping an amazing soundtrack. It's truly the opposite of something like Ace Combat, because Afterburner Climax wants you to go full speed all the time, do crazy flips, and well, use the power of slow motion bullet time in order to fire 10 missiles at once. It's hard to top this sense of ridiculousness, and for those of us who loved its predecessors and just arcadey titles in general, Climax is an absolute gem. This obviously, as the name of the video suggests, won't end well, as Afterburner Climax was taken off all stores in 2014, presumably due to the licensing of the real Grumman F-14D Tomcat aircraft, which is like the stupidest reason for a game like this to disappear. It popped back up on Android and iOS as part of Sega Forever in 2019, but has since disappeared again. Afterburner deserves way more, like a sequel even, but I hope that one day Sega will just re-release this so a whole new generation can appreciate it.
Look, I just don't want to be an old man whipping out an Xbox 360 being like, hey Sonny, you should play Afterburner Climax, before being told to shut up. Yes, I've already roleplayed all this out. It's gonna happen.
This wasn't the only time that Sega would pull stuff for real-world licensing. There's Outrun, of course, Sega Rally Online Arcade, and London 2012, the Olympics game. Not that anyone's pining for that. Sega was super active on the 7th generation's new digital storefronts, making sequels like this and ports of pretty much anything you can imagine, even if like half of it's now gone. But hey, this is the same company that once delisted multiple Sonic the Hedgehog games to, quote, increase the value of the brand, right before releasing Sonic 4. Nice. Two of the stranger delists would be The Cave and Alpha Protocol by Double Fine and Obsidian respectively. The Cave is back up on Steam nowadays, but Alpha Protocol isn't, and this one really hurts. Obsidian Entertainment, responsible for RPG mega hits Fallout New Vegas, Neverwinter Nights 2, and Pillars of Eternity, made a little game called Alpha Protocol, one that is extremely weird. Imagine Mass Effect, but instead it's James Bond with Obsidian writing, choice making, and dialogue. Except it's also extremely glitchy, janky, got super mixed reviews, became a massive cult hit, and is now considered an actual good game? Yeah, I don't get it either. While you don't technically get to create a character, you play as a guy named Michael, who you can kind of customize, that travels worldwide doing spy things as he slowly uncovers a conspiracy. The choices you make and the way you talk to people is very important, as it greatly changes the outcome of the story. And by that I mean there's quite literally countless variables to the endings that can happen. Dialogue is super well written, the interactions are great and memorable, and you can even make your dude look like he belongs in Duck Dynasty if you want. It's just the actual moment-to-moment gameplay and spying that feels a little lackluster. Gunplay is a little RPG-ified, where you actually have to like stay locked onto somebody to shoot them with better accuracy, and it doesn't play as cleanly as say VATS from Fallout. It does take a bit to get used to, but if you can sit through it, it's well worth your time. Unfortunately, that'll be relegated to finding a physical copy on consoles or hoping you accidentally bought it in a bundle because it was fully removed from all digital stores in 2019. It seems like this was purely a Sega decision too. While Microsoft owns Obsidian now, other games of theirs are still available, so I guess that means Sega doesn't mind if you just click a few buttons on the World Wide Web. Let's go.
There's a couple of Sega games that have been delisted here and there, but there's also a big batch of things that were all taken down for one reason. I would say every PC gamer's worst nightmare and cursed word combination would be Games for Windows Live. And it's had a lot of casualties. This thing was a pain in the butt to use. It forced you to use an Xbox Live account, thankfully without paying monthly for it, and it just didn't really do anything worthwhile. Sega put this on a handful of releases, including one of my favorite games of all time, Virtua Tennis 4. I'm not joking.
Games for Windows Live is now a nearly unusable PC app that served as both DRM and online servers for specific games. So when Microsoft took this down, it was kind of like an Andros situation. Both Universe at War, Earth Assault, and Stormrise were affected and in return delisted due to this, but Sega's biggest casualty was definitely Virtua Tennis 4 World Tour. This was technically delisted in 2015 from everything due to licensing rights expiring with like real world people and brands like Adidas. But you can still download it from Steam and make it work. Now, with Games for Windows Live completely unfunctional, you gotta work for it. I was able to make it happen by finding a sketchy download link that didn't need to contact a server, but they sure don't make this easy. Thankfully, the game still works and is great. People might shrug off Virtua Tennis, but it's really like way closer to Mario Tennis than it is a simulation. I mean, you can make your create a character look like a total freak, give them a massive racket or some funny unlockables that would take too long for me to unlock to show off. There's a world tour mode where you play dumb mini games to level up, and it's a great time. Thankfully, there are physical copies floating around out there. If you're a Sega arcade sports kind of person, it's worth your time. But it's just the beginning of the Games for Windows Live casualties. Now, thankfully, some companies have gone out of their way to patch and fix this stuff. Quite literally a few weeks ago, Capcom went and removed it from Resident Evil 5, meaning the PC version of this is finally playable online again. But since a lot of these titles were built with this in mind, it's gonna take someone to go in and do a good bit of work. Capcom has several delisted titles that are stuck in this limbo. Lost Planets 1 and 2, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and clearly the best of the bunch, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, are unable to be purchased or played online at the moment. Considering it took Capcom that long to remove it from Resi 5, it could be a while, if ever, before you were able to play Lost Planet 2 again, which is a shame. That game's co-op rules. While it has been removed from several ports, there's a good handful of titles that are still locked behind Games for Windows Live. Tron Evolution, Juiced 2, Fuel, and weirdly Fable 3. I'm actually surprised that a majority of the Fable franchise isn't actively available on PC, and I'm one of those weirdos that really enjoyed the third one. The multiplayer integration's a lot of fun, especially because you can get married across save files. But yeah, another GFWL casualty. Then we've got the controversial Kane and Lynch Dead Men. While this is still available on other platforms, the only way you'll be getting a PC copy is by purchasing it physically and then breaking GFWL. This game was unique in that it starred two scumbag goons who don't really become anything more than scumbag goons. It's dark, not charming in the slightest, violent, and gritty as heck, which was kind of the status quo in the mid-2000s. There's some neat ideas in co-op, but that's gonna be offline only, so cozy up on the couch and feel miserable together. The couch in front of your desktop PC. Kane and Lynch was one of several things by Square Enix that were taken down, all of which we're giving a check back soon in 2021. However, considering this is by IO Interactive and a majority of the pull downs were on the Eidos side of things, well, I guess that's probably never going to happen. Pour one out for Kane and Lynch. And I guess Games for Windows Live? Look, all I'm saying is that they should really patch Lost Planet 2. The world needs it. Fable 3 can come too.
And while we're at it, we might as well pour one out for all of the online-only delisted games of Yonder. I think we've all had the experience of pouring a bunch of time and, in some cases, money into something that just doesn't exist anymore. It's heartbreaking, yeah. I sit around to this day thinking about WildStar and how much I miss it, and I guess technically something like Overwatch 1 also counts.
We could literally talk about dead MMORPGs, online-only titles, and even mobile games that are all delisted for several hours. There's a ton of creators on YouTube and other archive sites chronicling the rise and fall of a lot of these, so I'll keep it short. I miss Tribes Ascend a whole bunch. I grew up playing Tribes 2 on a crappy PC when I was like 12, spamming Shazbot at any given moment. Shazbot! The first few months of Ascend being around were like some of my best memories playing a free-to-play game ever. But like most of these, it eventually shut down because a lot of these online-only free-to-play titles have an expiration date that's usually less than 10 years. When the player base goes, so does the support. Unless, of course, you're one of the big ones like TF2. I dread the day when Marvel Snap snaps itself out of existence. Speaking of, wow, there's been a lot of mobile games that came and went. I mean, the current big rumor is that COD Mobile's gonna be phased out. That's a big one. What about the hundreds of smaller titles? Wild Arms Million Memory,
Memories, Danganronpa Unlimited Battle, the Final Fantasy 15 tie-in King's Knight being shut down after only 9 months? For every wildly successful Pokemon Go, you have 100 licensed anime mobile tie-ins that last less than a year. For me, it's Sega Heroes. No joke. A cracked out Western-made match 3 fighting/RPG starring Sega characters classic and new. Phantasy Star, Monkey Ball, Jet Set Radio. By the end of its life, they were putting out Yakuza characters before promptly shutting down, giving me extreme depression and forcing me to play WWE Champions instead, which isn't so bad. The biggest victim of this whole thing, though, are the MMORPGs. The massive, high-budget experience that you could sink hundreds of hours into, all completely yoinked offline. Thankfully, there are a few that have people working overtime to recreate them with private servers, like Phantasy Star Online. I mentioned WildStar before, and I loved its wacky action gameplay sci-fi approach to everything. Gone way too soon. I feel like the entire gaming industry saw the massive mainstream success of World of Warcraft and thought, oh, I'd love a piece of that pie, which led to things like frickin' Family Guy Online. Yeah, that's not just a joke, that was a real thing people were trying to create. It just never left beta, so I wasn't able to make myself a persona. This whole genre had so much competition that things would fall left and right, like Warhammer Online or Tabula Rasa. In 2023, there are near endless examples of dead MMORPGs to browse through that have become this video game boulevard of broken dreams. Rest in peace, Toontown Online, and all of these. Online-only games dying out due to a lack of revenue or interest is something that really no one is safe from, but only one company has the gall to dangle it in your face, and it's Nintendo. Just about every digital store from Sony and Microsoft is still up and running. You can buy things, you can download things, but Nintendo's about to have 4 offline. I mean, this is the company that's kind of shifted to the Disney Vault model, where they'll announce a game and when they're taking it offline in the same day. Twice. As it currently stands, between all of their digital exclusives across every platform, Nintendo's delisted hundreds of titles and services. Since the servers are also offline, that means you aren't able to re-download them. A lot of these haven't seen ports either. The Wii and soon the 3DS are the biggest loss of the bunch. Portable things like Attack of the Friday Monsters, A Tokyo Tale, Dylan's Rolling Western, and Harmonite are hardware specific, so they'd have to fully remake these to make it work on a Switch or beyond. WiiWare's definitely had it the roughest. Look, I might not be the biggest Wii guy, but Pokemon Rumble was a good, fun-to-play time with any group of friends. Gone. Doc Lewis's Punch-Out, the digital exclusive spin-off, gone. Blaster Master Overdrive, you guessed it, gone. It's kinda crazy that Nintendo hasn't made any attempt to forward port a lot of these, considering it uses a similar motion technology to the Switch, but I think Steam, Microsoft, and Sony have spoiled me. Personally, I think 2 of the biggest losses are the duo of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles spin-offs, My Life as a King and My Life as a Dark Lord. Biased? Absolutely. I love me some Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. But generally speaking, unless it's an online or mobile title that was taken offline, majority of the entire series is accessible somewhere. My Life as a King was a city builder taking place after the GameCube original where you, well, enjoy life as a king. It plays kind of like your Harvest Moons or any of those fantasy life simulators. You go through days doing tasks, making buildings, sending adventurers on quests, and trying to develop your kingdom to its fullest potential. I freaking love these types of games. If you put a city building and development minigame into an RPG or anything really, I'm gonna sink countless hours into it watching numbers go up. Dark Cloud? Mwah. It's got that signature Crystal Chronicles visual style and is cute as heck. Too bad it's gone forever. My Life as a Dark Lord is the opposite of that. You take control of the baddie and build yourself a tower. It's tower defense, my other favorite genre, but it's way scaled back in its execution. Dark Lord's not very complicated, but it does what it's supposed to do well enough, especially for a tiny WiiWare title that was only $10. Unfortunately, both of these did have a lot of DLC, which influenced the balance of everything, but there was plenty of fun to be had here regardless. There are so many digital exclusive Nintendo games that have been erased and delisted. I hope one day they'll come around and do the whole preservation of video game thing that all those hippies are talking about, but it doesn't seem likely. Just make sure to hold on to your Wii U with Meme Run installed. It'll be worth millions. Yeah, Nintendo's pretty bad about this whole deal, and it seems like they might just be getting worse over time. It's gonna be wild when the Switch eShop goes offline before the PlayStation 3's. I'm terrified. Which brings up another point. There are games that have been delisted that you look at and you just think, why?
Why did you take this down? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, some of these things are delisted without any explanation whatsoever. Not even classics are safe. For instance, both HD versions of Soul Calibur.
Look, I think everyone out there knows Soul Calibur 1 and 2 rule.
But both of these were removed from digital stores as recently as February 2022.
I can kind of understand why the second one was taken offline, considering it's got good old licensed comic book hero Spawn as a playable character. But there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be able to play the original. Thankfully, you can find digital codes of these laying around on the internet, but those are probably finite, and who knows how long it'll last. Speaking of, it's crazy that Metal Gear Solid HD has been delisted for this long. Konami's Metal Gear is one of the most well-renowned game franchises of all time, and that digital HD collection from the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 was pulled because of select historical archive footage. Now we're coming up on around a year and a half since that happened, so what's the deal? It's one of those rare titles that actually works all the way up to the Series X if you've got a physical 360 copy, but there's really no excuse for people to not have freaking Metal Gear Solid playable on modern platforms. The fact that I could search up the series on PlayStation Network and the only thing that pops up is 5 and Survive is wild. There's just some weird notable omissions from digital catalogs. Army of Two, 40th Day, and Devil's Cartel, well, not amazing, were both removed for what was most likely expiring music rights. Capcom's Dark Void was taken off of Steam because someone found out you could use it to generate unlimited CD keys. I'm sure the developer Airtight Games, who is definitely still around, can fix that in a jiffy. Delisted, and because it's Dark Void, we're probably not gonna see it again. But for the life of me, I can't understand why Minecraft Story Mode Seasons 1 and 2 have completely disappeared from the internet. Ever since Microsoft purchased Mojang, they've loved throwing everything Minecraft related onto store shelves. Toys, books, spin-off games, countless amounts of licensed DLC packs over the weirdest stuff. You've got Disney, Sonic the Hedgehog, Street Fighter, freaking Minions. Look, I'm just saying that you got some real passionate gamer freaks over there making Mega Man X DLC that actually works. But they don't seem to care about letting a whole new generation of kids experience this.
You're a hero, you know that?
Telltale Games versus having a visible, purchasable library of products. When Telltale went under back in 2018, they didn't re-up the rights for a lot of their adventure titles, and a whole bunch of them disappeared from the net. It was a meme for a bit that the only way to play Story Mode 1 was on Netflix, but as of December 2022, that's officially gone as well. Meaning that unless you already own one of the increasingly rare physical copies, it's gone. But it's not like it's impossible to bring it back. A publisher like Gearbox went out of their way to get Tales from the Borderlands back up. The DC licensed games are still around. There's no reason a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Microsoft wouldn't have the ability to get their own IP back on store shelves, but I guess they don't want to. In fact, with the digital version, you can't even download the episodes anymore. The servers are dead. It's completely gone. It all happened so fast that they even had to price the episodes at $100 a pop to dissuade people from buying prior to it being formally delisted.
Video games being taken away from consumers due to expiring rights and licenses is the most boring and predictable and also understandable reason for this happening. But you know what doesn't make sense? Wolfenstein 2009.
Wolfenstein might be one of the oldest and longest running gaming franchises out there, and it shouldn't be as underrated as it is. When it comes to video game developers getting done dirty, there's not many that have had it as rough as Raven Software. On top of having several things become delisted, they've even got a lot of games that have and will probably never get ported. I know we're all thinking it, X-Men Legends 2 deserves to see the light of day again. Raven's another victim of Activision's Call of Duty minds now, but Wolfenstein 2009 was straight up stolen. There was a weird period of time where id Software's IPs were being used by Activision, who we're gonna see a lot more of in this video. This included Enemy Territory Quake Wars, and of course, Wolfenstein. First-person shooters in the 7th generation were starting to heavily drift in favor of the snappy, arcadey Call of Duty Modern Warfare direction, and something like Wolfenstein just wasn't the big new shiny anymore. But this thing holds up. 2009 is like a fever dream, one that created this supernatural approach to
to the Wolfenstein canon. Guns, especially rifles, pack a heavy punch in both firing and sound design, but then it gets weird. The game's like a semi-open world with a hub that you can explore between levels. You have RPG-like upgrades you can buy, and most importantly, you get a talisman that gives you crazy super abilities. You can hop into the Veil, a tear in the fabric of reality between Earth and the Black Sun. Here you can see things better, move faster, and do all the things that you would expect a weird dimension-hopping talisman would give you the ability to do. This thing kind of hovered around the 7s, but I think that's too low for Raven's take on Wolfenstein. This thing might have felt old school at the time, but compared to everything else in retrospect, feels so much fresher. Kind of similar to how Doom 2016 was just like, hey, here's some arenas, here's a bunch of guns, have fun. This take on Wolfenstein, while nowhere near as good as Doom, was and is a breath of fresh, stupid, mindless, and dumb supernatural air in the drones of the bloomy PlayStation 3 era. Wolfenstein was regarded as mid by critics, and with audiences craving that modern warfare, it was a pretty big bomb. It led to layoffs, which is extremely unfortunate. So, why is this delisted? Well, they never gave an official reason, and the current speculation, which could be wrong, and this is really stupid, is that ZeniMax might have chosen to take this off of Steam to avoid brand confusion. Granted, there are a lot of Wolfensteins out there, but despite sitting around on Steam for nearly 5 years, it was delisted 2 weeks prior to the launch of the New Order. So ZeniMax was likely thinking, oh, we're gonna do a new thing, so the old one needs to go. Which is really stupid. Technically, Bethesda owns the rights to this, and if Microsoft purchases Activision, then everything's gonna be under the same banner again. It's just hard to imagine a timeline where anyone's gonna go to bat for a game that wasn't a critical darling that would also need some fixes here and there. But if you could acquire this by any means, since no one's letting you give them money, Wolfenstein 2009 is honestly worth a play. It's super underrated. Also, you can shoot multi-dimensional jellyfish and kill like 6 dudes at the same time. What's not to love?
Switching up gears a bit, the most common reason for a video game to be taken down and delisted is due to it being tied to an intellectual property, a cartoon, a movie, a comic book, a movie. I said movie 2 times. With very rare exception, retro licensed games are basically doomed to be stuck on whatever platform they came on. You basically have to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But now that these are being sold on digital platforms for a prolonged period of time, we're starting to see them disappear in real time. For instance, sticking with Raven Software, Marvel Ultimate Alliance.
This might be one of those cross-gen games, but in 2016, Activision went ahead and remastered both this and the sequel to the next generation. Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2 are both super solid Diablo clones that'll put you in the shoes of a ton of Marvel superheroes. I loved the original, and the remaster let me play it online with friends over a decade after its original release. For 2 extra years anyway, before they ripped them both offline. Same thing with the Transformers Fall of Cybertron remaster. All of these were obviously tossed onto digital markets in order to make a quick buck before giving up on licensed games altogether. Superhero tie-ins with Marvel are typically the first to bite the dust, especially certain things disappearing after the Disney purchase. The fact that multiple Marvel vs. Capcoms have vanished, especially the second one, is a crazy oversight. Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy being gone is a shame, even if it's got nothing on the Square Enix release, which, if you ask me, is probably gonna end up on the wrong side of that equation soon. I mean, heck, just the other day it was announced that The Avengers is getting delisted in September. It ain't just Marvel superheroes though. We also got Kick-Ass.
Hey, you guys got a problem?
Yeah, you're the problem.
Yeah, this thing was so rough and unmemorable that Delisted Games doesn't even have a page for it. But this is likely the case for a lot of things. Some are missed, some are not, and others are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time reshelled. An Ubisoft-made remake of Konami's timeless, classic Turtles in Time. If you've ever wondered what a totally soulless recreation of a legit 10 out of 10 is like, look no further. I don't know how you call yourself Turtles in Time and not at least try to quote the amazing soundtrack, but here you go. Look what they replaced Sewer Surfing with. It's not terrible, but it's not Turtles in Time. I think we're all thankful for the Cowabunga collection making things right. It kind of feels like most licensed games are destined to get delisted now, which is a shame, but understandable. Especially when you make stuff like Guardians of Middle-earth. Remember when MOBAs were all the rage? Like, before Pokemon Unite, I'm talking primetime Dota clones all day. Well, if you've ever wanted to hear the sentence, I think Golem is a top-tier jungler, then this is for you. This actually was one of the first MOBAs to release on console consoles and was a free PlayStation Plus title when it came out, so you'd think it would have some sort of staying power, but alas, it was delisted. After 6 years. Oh my god. That's like 12 times longer than Infinite Crisis, the DC Comics MOBA. There's tons of discontinued and shut down licensed titles out there. Shout out to any homies who played Gotham City Imposters. That game ruled.
So how about a licensed game that's not just bad, it's awful. Not just one, but 2 games published by Konami of all companies. I'm sure a bunch of y'all have seen these Saw films. I like the first one myself, but you might not have played the video game, so do you want to play a game?
Well, hopefully it's something else. Saw the video game released just in time for Halloween 2009, and this thing immediately became the internet's punching bag. For anyone who saw the films, you might be wondering, how in the world do you make a Saw video game? And if your answer was a minigame collection trying to pose itself like a Silent Hill or Condemned sequel, you'd be right. You play as Detective Tapp, Danny Glover's character from the film, as you end up in an amalgamation of traps as the Jigsaw Killer punishes you for becoming obsessed with your job after your partner dies. Okay, sure, you got depression. Well, you wanna play a game? Saw is awful. It's a bunch of half-baked ideas tossed together into a package that exists only to show off gore, and just like a majority of the films, is ultimately pointless. There's no real message here. I mean, the canon ending is extremely messed up, making everyone kinda just look like a dick. You gotta love walking around the map and stumbling upon the Jigsaw puzzle rooms and seeing dead bodies all over the place. Like, how did this barbed wire explode on this guy? What's going on? Saw was not good. It doesn't appear to have sold well. It got super mixed reviews, and I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Which of course means we've got a sequel. Saw 2 Flesh and Blood, a title that was worse in every manner. Both of these games thought it would be a great idea to do constant flash jump cuts, kinda similar to the movie, but they cranked that widescreen opacity all the way up to 100, so it's like a strobe that's legit painful to look at. God, this game is dumb. Flesh and Blood wanted to up the ante and present things a lot more spooky, but like, it's Saw. There's no supernatural element, it's just some dude wearing a pig mask running around making people accidentally kill themselves. That, and I always think about this one old video on the internet.
You wanna play a little game?
This one never hit PC like the prequel, and that's likely due to the fact that it was absolutely demolished in the reviews. Both of these games have some awful combat. They look bad, have a totally uninteresting story, and at the end of the day, it just boils down to being a gory QTE collection. One that you can't buy anymore, not that you would want to, as they were delisted. One of them twice. So yeah, it still feels weird to see the Konami logo on this. No, I don't want to play your game.
Lastly, speaking of big publishers, we might as well revisit Activision for the last game I'm going to get into today. Now, I've mentioned this a decent amount in past videos, but I never really sat down to talk about 007 Legends. And I've got to say, this thing existing was a weird decision.
Whenever Activision announced that they were going to be stepping away from making licensed titles, it was at the tail end of the release of the controversial 007 Legends, a game that was only around for 2.5 months before they pulled the plug, effectively making their entire plan completely transparent. We're going to lose a license soon, so let's milk it one last time. Coming out in October 2012 and being delisted alongside every Activision James Bond title in January 2013, 007 Legends is still to this day the last Bond title ever released. I'm a James Bond guy for sure. I grew up watching the Pierce Brosnan films, and as an adult, From Russia with Love has become this classic that I love to rewatch every year. So having nostalgia for GoldenEye and Nightfire kinda comes with that package. This dude's been published by all sorts of companies, and Activision had the rights for quite some time. I actually have fond memories of that Quantum of Solace game as well as Bloodstone, but 007 Legends was a different kind of beast. Originally planned to come out alongside Skyfall as part of the series' 50th anniversary, it plays like a collection of different Bond films. Except instead of paying each actor for their likeness, they were gonna make Daniel Craig the face of everything, which I guess is totally fair. Though they probably shouldn't have replaced Halle Berry with this chick. On the disc, you go through Goldfinger, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Moonraker, License to Kill, and Die Another Day. Skyfall was included as DLC, so all Bonds were included. I assume they only picked Die Another Day because it was the only Brosnan-era film not to get a game adaptation, but that movie was the worst. The main problem with all of this is that it is quite literally, not figuratively, a Call of Duty clone. It's on the same engine. It plays nearly identical. There's little fun moments of spying you do from time to time, but like, watch this. It's got that same egregious snap zoom iron sight auto aim you get in any Call of Duty, and I don't know how I feel about 007 turning into a mass murderer on this level. The raid on Fort Knox from Goldfinger is amped up to the extreme, with dudes giving me the military go, 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 and the fight with Oddjob being this huge QTE encounter. It's kicked up to 11 and seen through the eyes of nearly silent protagonist James Bond. Yes, the spy who loved me, the guy as quiet as Chrono from Chrono Trigger. 007 Legends tries really hard to be the spectacle first-person shooter that Activision was becoming known for, and if anyone could do it, it was developer Eurocom, who had worked on several Bond titles, including my favorite, Nightfire. But the speculated belief is that this thing was rushed in order to fit with deadlines and get those holiday sales before Acti abandoned the Bond license forever. It only has brief moments of feeling like a spy action thriller, but it mostly just feels like a mindless murder fest. The stealth sequences are terrible. The shooting feels inconsistent. I actually played this in the same day as Wolfenstein, and that game feels way better in like every manner, except the shotgun. The shotgun kind of goes off. The idea of this game is something that's awesome. Big set pieces, big moments, celebrating half a century of James Bond. But this execution was super embarrassing, a clear money-grubbing move, and as a result, Eurocom folded immediately after its release. This is obviously delisted, so if you want a copy, it's gonna be an increasingly rare one, which somehow made it to 3 platforms, including the Wii U for some reason. And there is a little fun to be had for maybe the first mission, but the deeper you get, the more shallow and wrong it all feels. There was a multiplayer mode, and any footage of this literally looks like any Call of Duty. Like, you would be forgiven for thinking that this is an official product by Infinity Ward. New zombie map? No, sorry kid, just Oddjob. If you play 007 Legends for any reason, which you shouldn't because it's pretty bad, let it be for the fact that it is super unique and bizarre. They truly don't make licensed games like this anymore.
No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
So there you have it, the world of delisted video games that you can't play anymore, unless you're tricky. And I know a bunch of you are. It's actually because of this video that I found out how good PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 emulation actually are, so there's a bright future ahead for the preservation of games online as long as some morons don't take it off the internet. I mean, just the other week, the battery in my limited edition Hannah Montana PSP decided to expand, rendering the console useless, so, you know, at least I got the internet. There are obviously way too many delisted video games that deserve a shout out, and I did my best to curate a little compilation video of things that interested me or things I thought needed to be talked about, so if there's something that you think I missed, let me know down in the comments below. I'm sure I'll be able to fit it into a video in the future, and I probably will. If you liked the video, check out today's sponsor, support the Patreon, or buy one of my t-shirts over on thepixelempire.com. Any support goes right back into the channel, and as you can probably tell, we've been working our butts off. Anyways, I've been Austin, and I'm gonna take a big nap, so catch me next time when I talk about some more rare and expensive video games. And then after that, maybe I'll talk about the Avengers, or Deadpool. I'll do both. Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Aaron Kwolek, Blackfoot Ferret, Blake Thomas, Cheeks, Chris Shelton, Doug Prince, DX Buster, David Molnar, Elijah, GM Pinks, Hey Quiggles, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Kieran Arter, Nick Irving, Ryan Talbert, and Vox. Thank you so much for the generous support. It took me a little bit to get this video out, but I had a few things going on, and I also have a lot of stuff coming out in April, so stay tuned for that. I just want to say that y'all have been very generous. The channel's been growing a lot lately, and it's a lot more than I could ever dream of. We're about to cross the 250,000 subscriber mark, which is insane. But hey, I'll do my best to keep things going. Catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.